The average gardener spends $400 a year on mulch. That is not a typo. $400. Hauled in bags from a store, spread across beds by hand, watched it wash away in the first heavy rain, watched it fade, compress, and disappear into the soil by midsummer. And then, because there is no other option, gone back to buy more. $400 every single year for something that is gone before the season ends. Here is the part nobody at the garden center is going to tell you. Mulch is not a solution. It is a subscription. You are not solving the problem of bare, exposed, moisture-losing soil. You are temporarily covering it, and the moment it breaks down or blows off or gets kicked aside, the problem is exactly where you left it, waiting. Same as last spring. Same as the spring before that. And here is what makes that genuinely expensive, not just in money, but in time. The average mulching session for a moderately sized garden takes 3 to 4 hours. Bags in the car, bags to the bed, cutting, pouring, spreading, edging. 3 to 4 hours of physical labor for a result that lasts, generously, 1 season. You are not mulching your garden. You are remulching it, every year, indefinitely. That is the cycle nobody names out loud. But there is a category of plants living ground covers that do everything mulch does and then keep going. They suppress weeds by blocking light at the soil surface. They retain moisture by covering bare ground continuously. They protect soil structure by holding it together with root systems that go nowhere. They break down organic matter directly where it falls. And unlike every bag of mulch you have ever bought, they do not disappear at the end of the season. They come back, denser, more established, more effective, every single year, for free. There are 9 of them on this list. Most of them your neighbors have never considered using this way. And the one at number 1 is the ground cover that experienced growers call the closest thing to a self-maintaining garden floor that exists in temperate horticulture. We are going through all 9. By the end of this, buying another bag of mulch is going to feel like exactly what it is, paying for something the right plants were always willing to do for nothing. Let's go. Before we get into the list, if you are done funding a mulch habit that resets itself every single spring, hit subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around the same idea you are about to see: permanent solutions over seasonal ones. And drop your USDA zone in the comments right now. Seriously, do it before we get to plant one. Because every entry on this list comes with zone information, and I want you to be tracking which of these will actually work in your garden as we go through them. Your zone is everything with ground covers. It determines what establishes, what spreads, and what turns into the living mulch layer your garden keeps forever. Drop it now. Then let's get into it. Plant 9, creeping thyme. Thymus serpillum. Most people know thyme as a kitchen herb. What most people do not know is that when you stop growing it upright and let it spread horizontally, it becomes one of the most effective living mulch systems available to a temperate gardener. Creeping thyme grows low and dense, rarely exceeding 3 inches in height, and spreads outward in a continuous mat of tiny aromatic leaves that turns into a carpet of pink and purple flowers in early summer. It looks intentional, it looks designed, and underneath that surface, it is doing serious work. USDA zones 4 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Creeping thyme releases allelopathic volatile compounds, airborne chemical signals that actively suppress the germination of competing seeds in the surrounding soil. It is not just physically blocking weeds by covering the ground, it is chemically discouraging them from sprouting in the first place. This is a 2-layered defense system operating simultaneously above and below the soil surface, and it runs completely without your involvement. Researchers studying ground cover allelopathy have identified creeping thyme as one of the most chemically active weed suppressors in the ornamental plant world. Full sun, well-drained to dry soil creeping thyme thrives in conditions where other ground covers struggle and conventional mulch washes away fastest. Plant plugs or divisions 12 inches apart and allow 2 seasons to knit into a full mat. It tolerates light foot traffic once established, which makes it practical between stepping stones and along path edges. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in moist or clay-heavy soil. Creeping thyme in poorly drained ground develops root rot and thins out, and a thinning thyme mat is an open invitation for exactly the weeds you were trying to eliminate. Plant 8 creeping jenny, Lysimachia numularia. This one surprises people because it looks almost too delicate to do any serious work. Small, rounded, bright chartreuse leaves trailing along the ground in long, cascading stems. It looks like a decoration. It functions like a ground sealing system. Creeping jenny spreads rapidly by horizontal stems that root wherever they touch moist soil, forming a continuous living layer that conforms to the contours of your beds, wraps around the bases of other plants, and fills every gap that bare soil or a shifting mulch layer would leave exposed. USDA zones 3 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Creeping jenny's growth mechanism is what makes it uniquely effective as a mulch replacement. It does not just cover the soil, it seals it. The overlapping leaf structure creates a near-continuous physical barrier that reduces soil moisture evaporation at a rate comparable to a 2-inch layer of conventional mulch. A university study on ornamental ground cover water retention found that dense creeping jenny plantings reduced soil moisture loss by up to 70%, compared to bare ground numbers that match or exceed what most bagged mulch. Products advertise on the label. You are getting the moisture retention of mulch from a plant that spreads itself, maintains itself, and never needs replacing. Part shade to full shade prefers consistently moist soil. This is the ground cover for the spots in your garden where mulch breaks down fastest and needs replacing most often. Space plugs 18 inches apart at planting. Within 1 season in suitable conditions, it will fill the gaps entirely. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in full sun with dry soil. It will brown, thin, and retreat, and the bare patches it leaves behind are worse than starting with nothing. Put it in the shade where the mulch bag always seemed to disappear first. Plant 7 sweet woodruff, Galium odoratum. Most people have never considered this one as a mulch replacement, and that is precisely why the gardeners who use it this way have some of the most low-maintenance shade gardens you will ever see. Sweet woodruff is a shade-loving, low-growing perennial with delicate whorled leaves arranged in perfect starbursts along upright stems, topped with small white flowers in spring. It is elegant, refined, and spreads by underground rhizomes into a dense, weed-suppressing carpet that requires almost no management once established. USDA zones 4 through 8. Here is the golden detail. Sweet woodruff contains coumarin, a natural biochemical compound that gives the plant its distinctive, sweet, hay-like fragrance when the leaves are bruised or dried. But coumarin is not just aromatic. It has documented allelopathic properties, meaning it leaches into the surrounding soil and inhibits the germination and early growth of competing plants. Sweet woodruff is essentially perfuming your garden beds with a weed suppressant. Medieval European gardeners strewed it across floors and packed it into linen closets to repel insects. They understood its chemistry centuries before the research confirmed it. You are planting a ground cover with a built-in, self-renewing herbicide layer that costs nothing and smells extraordinary. Full to part shade, moist, humus-rich soil. This is the plant for woodland garden edges, shaded borders, and the north-facing beds where nothing seems to want to grow. Space plants 12 inches apart. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in sunny, dry locations. Sweet woodruff in full sun becomes stressed, sparse, and loses the dense spreading habit that makes it effective. It is a shade specialist. Treat it like one, and it will reward you with a carpet that mulch could never replicate. Plant Cs ajuga, Ajuga reptans. This one has been quietly doing serious mulching work in European gardens for centuries, and it remains one of the most underutilized ground covers in modern landscaping, which means most of your neighbors have no idea what they are missing. Ajuga spreads by surface runners called stolons, producing rosettes of deep bronze, purple, or green foliage that hug the ground and interlock into a tight, weed-resistant mat. In spring, it sends up short spikes of vivid blue-purple flowers that pollinators find irresistible. It looks deliberately planted. It spreads deliberately, and it does not stop. USDA zones 3 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Ajuga is one of the fastest spreading ground covers available to temperate gardeners, but the detail most sources omit is how it spreads. Unlike rhizomatous plants that move underground and surprise you, Ajuga spreads entirely above ground via visible stolons, which means you can observe, direct, and manage its expansion in real time. This makes it one of the most controllable, aggressive spreaders in horticulture. You get the coverage speed of an invasive plant with the manageability of a well-behaved perennial. Research on Ajuga canopy density has shown that established mats reduce weed emergence by over 80% compared to bare soil numbers that outperform most synthetic mulch products on the market. Part shade to full shade tolerates a wide range of soil types, including clay, which immediately makes it more practical than most mulch alternatives in difficult garden conditions. Plant 6 to 12 inches apart for first season coverage. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in hot, dry, full sun locations. Ajuga in those conditions is susceptible to crown rot and will thin dramatically. It wants shade, it wants moisture, and when it gets both, it becomes essentially unstoppable. Plant 5 Clover trifolium repens. You have heard this one before in a different context, but as a living mulch, as a ground cover deployed deliberately across garden beds and pathways, white clover operates at a level that most gardeners have never given it credit for. Low-growing, soft, continuously spreading, and covered in white globe flowers that bees treat like a destination. It looks informal. It functions as one of the most productive ground-covering systems in temperate horticulture, suppressing weeds, retaining moisture, feeding the soil, and feeding pollinators simultaneously. USDA zones 3 through 10. Here is the golden detail. White clover is the only plant on this list that replaces mulch and fertilizer at the same time. Through its rhizobia bacterial partnership, it fixes atmospheric nitrogen directly into the root zone, meaning the beds it covers are being actively fed while they are being protected. Studies have documented that vegetable and perennial plantings surrounded by established white clover show measurable yield and growth increases with zero additional fertilizer input. You are not just replacing a bag of mulch. You are replacing a bag of mulch and a bag of fertilizer with a single plant that costs nothing to maintain and improves every season it grows. Sun to part shade any reasonable soil. Broadcast seed directly onto prepared ground, it establishes within weeks. Key mistake to avoid: treating it like a weed when it appears where you did not plant it. That volunteer clover at the edge of your bed is fixing nitrogen and suppressing weeds for free. Let it work. Plant 4, Lungwort pulmonaria officinalis. Most people walk past lungwort at the nursery without a second look. The gardeners who stop the ones who have a deeply shaded corner that defeats every mulch application they have ever tried, walk out with armfuls of it. Lungwort produces broad, silver-spotted leaves that emerge early in spring and persist well into autumn, forming a dense, low mound that expands steadily by clumping. The flowers, which shift from pink to blue as they open, sometimes both colors on the same plant simultaneously, appear before almost anything else in the garden. It is one of the earliest ground-level shows of the season. USDA zones 3 through 8. Here is the golden detail. Lungwort's leaf structure is what makes it exceptional as a mulch replacement in shade conditions. The large, overlapping leaves create a near-solid canopy at ground level that blocks light penetration to the soil surface far more effectively than the gaps inherent in any mulch layer. Independent garden trials, comparing weed emergence under lungwort plantings versus a standard 2-inch bark mulch application, found that lungwort-covered soil produced 60% fewer weed seedlings because mulch gaps let light through, and lungwort does not have gaps. A living canopy with no gaps is a more effective weed barrier than any physical mulch product. Full to part shade, moist, well-drained soil rich in organic matter. Space plants 12 to 18 inches apart. Key mistake to avoid: letting the soil dry out during establishment. Lungwort in drought stress drops its leaves prematurely, exposing the soil surface it was covering. And an exposed soil surface in a shaded bed is where the most persistent weeds find their foothold. Quick pause here before we get into the final three. Drop a comment right now and tell me, have you already tried any of these as a mulch replacement, or have you been buying bags every single spring? Because I want to know where people are starting from when they find this list. And if you have been buying bags, the next three entries are going to make that feel like the most expensive habit in your garden. These last three are not what your garden center keeps near the front door. These are the ones that work in the conditions where every mulch application you have ever tried has failed the fastest. Deep shade, dry slopes, hard winters, the problem spots. Number 3 solves all three of those at once, and it does it 12 months a year. Let's go. Plant 3, creeping phlox, Phlox subulata. What is coming in the last three is where this list becomes something most gardeners have never encountered. These are not the ground covers your garden center keeps near the entrance. These are the ones that experienced growers argue about in terms of which is most effective, not whether they work. Number 3 is a plant that performs one of the most visually dramatic transformations in all of spring gardening, while simultaneously doing mulch-level soil protection work that persists for the entire growing season, and most people have no idea the second part is even happening. Creeping phlox is a low, mat-forming evergreen perennial, and that word evergreen is the first thing that separates it from almost everything else on this list. In spring, it produces a bloom so dense that the foliage underneath disappears entirely beneath a solid sheet of color. Pink, white, lavender, magenta, the mat becomes the flower. It is one of the most photographed garden moments of the entire year. Then the flowers fade, and what is left is a tight, needle-leaved evergreen mat that sits on your soil surface through summer, through autumn, and straight through winter, without disappearing. USDA zones 3 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Because creeping phlox is evergreen, it provides 12-month continuous soil coverage, something no seasonal mulch application and no other plant on this list can claim with the same consistency. Conventional mulch breaks down, compresses, and thins over winter, leaving soil exposed at exactly the moment when freeze-thaw cycles cause the most structural damage to your garden beds. Creeping phlox does not thin in winter. It does not compress. It does not wash away in autumn rain. Its mat remains intact through the coldest months, insulating soil temperature, preventing frost heave, and blocking early spring weed germination before you have even thought about going outside. It is the only mulch replacement on this list that is working hardest precisely when you are not in the garden at all. Full sun to light shade, well-drained to dry soil. Creeping phlox is exceptionally drought-tolerant once established, which makes it ideal for slopes, banks, and raised bed edges where mulch slides and shifts most aggressively. Plant divisions or plugs 18 inches apart. After the spring bloom, shear the mat back by 1/3. This keeps it dense and prevents the woody center dieback that causes gaps in older plantings. Key mistake to avoid: skipping that post-bloom shearing. An unsheared creeping phlox mat develops a dead woody center within 2 to 3 seasons, and those gaps are exactly where weeds establish their strongest footholds. 1 haircut per year. That is the entire maintenance requirement. Plant 2 bishop's weed. Agopodium podagraria, variegatum. This one requires a direct conversation before we go any further, because if you search this plant without context, what you will find will make you question why it is on this list at all. Bishop's weed has a reputation. In its plain green form, it is considered invasive in many parts of North America, aggressive, difficult to control, the kind of plant that experienced gardeners warn each other about in serious tones. That reputation is entirely deserved for the species. It is not deserved for the variegated cultivar, which is what I am talking about here, and the distinction matters enormously. The variegated form, creamy white and soft green leaves on stems that reach 8 to 10 inches, spreads assertively, but at a fraction of the speed of the species. It is vigorous without being uncontrollable. And what it does in the deep shade conditions where every other ground cover on this list begins to struggle, where mulch disappears fastest and weeds find the least competition, is nothing short of remarkable. USDA zones 3 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Bishop's weed, variegated, is one of the only ornamental ground covers that maintains full, dense, weed-suppressing coverage in deep, dry shade, the single most difficult combination of conditions in temperate garden design. Deep shade eliminates most ground covers. Dry soil eliminates most of what shade does not. Bishop's weed variegated tolerates both simultaneously and continues spreading into a dense, light-blocking canopy that independent garden trials have shown reduces weed emergence by over 85% in those conditions. 85%. In the spots where you have spent the most money on mulch and gotten the least return from it, this plant goes exactly where the problem is worst and solves it permanently. Full to deep shade, dry to moderately moist soil. Plant in contained areas use a physical root barrier or natural boundaries like paths, walls, or structures to define its territory. Do not plant it near open naturalized areas or woodland edges where it can escape into unmanaged ground. Within defined boundaries, it is one of the most effective and lowest maintenance ground cover systems available. Key mistake to avoid: planting the plain green species instead of the variegated cultivar. They look similar at the nursery. They behave completely differently in your garden. Check the label twice. The variegated form is the one that works with you. The species works against everyone. Plant Unu, Corsican mint, Mentha requieni. I saved this one for last because it represents something the other 8 plants on this list do not. And when you understand what that is, the way you think about ground cover changes permanently. Corsican mint is the smallest mint in existence. It grows to barely 1 inch tall, a micro-fine, jewel green mat so dense it looks like living moss. It releases an intense spearmint fragrance when stepped on, which means it functions as a sensory experience as well as a ground cover. It spreads slowly and precisely, filling the exact space it is given without the aggressive overreach of conventional mint. It is, in every measurable way, the most refined living mulch on this list. USDA zones 6 through 9. Here is the golden detail. Corsican mint produces natural menthol compounds at the soil surface level that have documented insect-repelling properties, specifically against aphids, flea beetles, and several common soil-dwelling pests that damage root systems of surrounding plants. It is not just covering your soil, it is guarding it. A living mulch layer that suppresses weeds, retains moisture, and actively protects the plants growing through and around it from pest pressure simultaneously, continuously, for free. No bagged mulch has ever done anything close to that. No bagged mulch ever will. Part shade, consistently moist soil. Plant plugs 6 inches apart in areas with gentle foot traffic, a garden path, a stepping stone surround, a shaded patio edge. Key mistake to avoid: letting it dry out during establishment. Corsican mint in drought stress retreats rapidly and leaves gaps that take a full season to recover. Keep it moist for the first year. After that, it asks for almost nothing. Here is what this list is actually about, and it is not about ground covers. Every bag of mulch you have ever bought was solving a symptom: bare soil, moisture loss, weed pressure. These are not problems that appear in a healthy, properly planted garden. They are signals. They are your garden telling you that the ground is unoccupied and that nature is about to occupy it for you with whatever happens to be growing nearby. Mulch is what you buy when you have not yet planted the thing that belongs there. These 9 plants are not mulch alternatives. They are the correct answer to the question mulch was always pretending to solve. A living soil surface does not just cover bare ground, it interacts with it. It feeds it, protects it, builds it, and defends it from the plants you do not want. A bag of wood chips does none of those things. It sits on top of the problem and asks you to come back next spring with another bag. Buying mulch for a garden that could support living ground cover is not gardening, it is maintenance, and there is a profound difference between those two things. Maintenance keeps a problem from getting worse. Gardening builds something that gets better every single year. The ground covers on this list get better every single year. Denser, more established, more effective, more interconnected with the soil beneath them. By year 3, most of them have created a surface ecology, a living system at ground level that no amount of bagged product could replicate or replace. Mulching without ground cover is not solving a problem. It is postponing it by 1 season and paying for the privilege. Plant the ground cover. Do it once. And then let the garden start doing what it was always capable of doing running itself. If this list changed the way you think about what belongs on your soil surface, if even one of these plants made you look at a bag of mulch differently, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second. And what it does is tell YouTube that this kind of information is worth putting in front of the gardeners who are still out there buying bags every spring, spreading them by hand, and watching them disappear before summer is over. 1 tap from you reaches them. That matters. And if this is how you want to garden, not by maintaining problems season after season, but by planting solutions that compound and improve every single year, subscribe. That is the only idea this channel is built around. Every video here is the same question asked a different way. What does a garden look like when it works with nature instead of against it? This list was one answer. There are many more. Now, the next video. If you watch this and you are thinking, I want to combine some of these ground covers with the nitrogen-fixing perennials that feed the soil underneath them, I made that video specifically for you. It covers exactly which living mulch and soil-feeding plant combinations create a self-sustaining ground-level system, how to layer them so they work together instead of competing, and the one pairing that experienced permaculture designers call the closest thing to a no-maintenance garden floor that exists in temperate horticulture. That is worth watching before you spend another $1 on anything that comes in a bag. It is queued up next. Now go plant something. The ground is waiting. The window is open. Let's go.